Stonehenge didn't just happen. Those stones were put there on purpose. It was a deliberate act, a kind of genius, really. They were connecting the earth to the cosmos, to the stars, and it makes you see history differently. It's a new framework where every mountain, every river, every star had meaning. It all meant something to them. So why would a culture do that? Why move mountains of stone just to mirror a constellation? What were they trying to harness in the landscape? What hidden forces? And when you look at a site like that, at its silent grandeur, what story is it waiting to tell? The Great Pyramid sides face north, south, east, and west. That's not an accident, it's a statement. The builders knew their place in the cosmos. For ancient cultures, the sky was a map, it was a clock, it was a sacred text. The sun and the moon and the stars, they were the reference points, the celestial compass. So when they put up a stone or laid out a city, they were drawing lines. Lines between the earth and the heavens. That's archaeoastronomy. Researchers like Clive Ruggles, they look at how ancient people built astronomical knowledge into their structures. And what they find, these sites were observatories, permanent ones. A temple window might only catch the setting sun on the winter solstice. A standing stone might cast a shadow that hits a marker only at the equinox. These alignments had a practical use. The solstice tells you when to plant, when to harvest. It sets the rhythm, but it was more than agriculture. It was spiritual. Ritual timing was cosmic timing. To hold a festival under the right alignment was to join the order of the universe. Teotihuacan in Mexico. Its three main pyramids are arranged like the three stars of Orion's belt. The city on the ground mirrored the city in the sky. That's the idea, a cosmic blueprint. For these builders, geography and astronomy were the same thing. The landscape was the canvas, the stars were the model. So why do it? Why move so much stone just to catch one sliver of light on one morning? Because they believed that moment had power. The connection between the land and the celestial event, it was real. It was a way to harness the fundamental forces, to build a bridge between the human realm and the divine. This obsession with the sky, it leads to another question. If the sky told them where to build, what about the earth? What did the earth itself have to say? The earth had its own kind of magic. You could think of a dowser walking a field with a forked branch, feeling for something, a vibration, a pull, a whisper in the land that said to build here. That idea is ancient. In China, it was Feng Shui, arranging spaces with the flow of Kai. In Europe, later, they spoke of ley lines, alignments of ancient sites. The practice is called Geomancy, the belief that the earth is alive, pulsing with unseen forces, that by placing a stone or a temple just right, you could tap into that power. This was a form of environmental engineering, to harness terrestrial energy for spiritual benefit for the community, to amplify a ritual. So choosing a hilltop or a valley wasn't about the view. It was listening, feeling for the heartbeat of the place. Modern researchers go to sites like Stonehenge with instruments. They find measurable electromagnetic anomalies. Shifts in the magnetic field, unusual ground conductivity, as if the builders pinpointed where the Earth's own energy was different. That's sacred geography. A mountain isn't just rock, it's a guardian. A river isn't just water, it's a serpent of life, a boundary. Every cliff, every spring, a feature in a living landscape. Building at the intersection of ley lines on an energy vortex was like plugging into a battery. It could make prayers more potent, healing more effective. Create a space where the community felt connected. But in this living landscape, one element was non-negotiable: practical, spiritual, essential: water. Water was the first line on any blueprint. The Nile didn't just flow past the pyramids, it was the reason they were there. Its floods were predictable, life-giving, a rhythm of renewal that mirrored their whole belief in life and death and rebirth. A monument without water was unthinkable. It was a practical thing for the workers, for mixing mortar, for moving stone, but it was more than that. Water was a sacred highway. A boundary between worlds, a surface that mirrored the sky and hinted at what was below. A spring wasn't just a source, it was a portal. This understanding of water defined civilizations. Take Mohenjo-Daro in the Indus Valley over 4,000 years ago. They laid out the whole city with a grid, baked brick drains, covered sewers, sophisticated wells. They weren't just managing water, they were mastering it, a public health system of stunning precision, keeping a dense city functioning. Then there's Machu Picchu, the mountaintop citadel. The Inca engineers found a spring and channeled it, a network of stone canals directing fresh water to fountains and baths throughout the city. The water itself was part of the ritual. Its sound and flow, a constant reminder of the life force they called Kamak. The spiritual dimension is clear. In many traditions, water cleansed souls. It carried prayers. To build a temple beside a sacred spring, or to make a pool that captured the temple's image, was to double its power, connecting the earthly structure to the heavens above and the watery world below. This integration reached its peak at a place like Angkor Wat. The whole temple complex is more than stone. It's the center of a vast, engineered landscape. A massive moat for the cosmic ocean. Elaborate canals and reservoirs, they called them barrays, that managed the monsoon floods, irrigated rice to feed a city, and created a symbolic map of the Hindu universe. The monument wasn't just near water, it was woven into a hydraulic network, so grand it shaped the fate of an empire. So the blueprint takes shape, the sky gave alignment. The Earth's energy suggested placement, and water provided the essential, sacred lifeblood. But there's one more layer, the ground beneath their feet. The ground itself was the last piece of the puzzle. The stones they built with were part of the conversation. At Baalbek in Lebanon, you have the trilithon. 3 stones, each one is around 800 tons. That's 2 jumbo jets. They were cut from a quarry nearby, moved uphill, and placed with a precision that still confounds people. The question isn't just how they moved them, but why they chose that stone from that place. Often, it was necessity. Moving stone over distance was a monumental task. So the local geology dictated the design. A culture in a limestone region built with limestone. A civilization near granite quarries used granite. It was a marriage of ambition and reality. But this practicality had intention. Builders didn't just use any rock. They looked for bedrock, the most stable foundation, to anchor their temples against earthquakes and erosion. They were building for eternity, and they knew the earth had to hold them. Then they selected stone for its properties and its meaning. Limestone is soft when quarried, then it hardens in the air. It was workable, good for intricate carvings that could tell stories. Granite is brutally hard, resistant to weathering. It spoke of permanence, of an unbreakable connection. Choosing granite was a statement that this would outlast kings and empires. The link between place and material could become the entire point. Easter Island, Rapa Nui, is an example. The Moai statues, those silent giants, were all carved from one type of volcanic tuff from the quarry at Rono-Roroku. The islanders didn't just get stone from there. The quarry was a sacred workshop. The statues were partially carved in place, then transported, still connected to their birthplace until the last moment. The monument's power came from the mountain it came from. It was a ritual of extraction, a journey from earth to form, so the foundation was more than a slab of rock. It was a chosen piece of the landscape, selected for its strength and its symbolic weight. This bond between monument and material source created a closed loop. The earth provided the body, the sky the alignment, the water gave it life. But for a civilization to commit that kind of effort, there had to be one more reason. A reason that looked beyond the spiritual and the practical, toward power and survival. What did a perfectly placed monument offer that nothing else could? A monument could be a fortress. It was a statement of control carved right into the horizon. From a high place you could see everything: armies approaching, the weather shifting, the flow of goods and people. This wasn't just about safety, it was about power. A city on a hill like the Acropolis in Athens was permanently on display. Its temples gleamed in the sun, visible for miles. A constant reminder of the city's divine favor and its human authority. To live in its shadow was to understand your place. The message was clear: we are here. We are watching, we are protected. Defense was the most immediate calculation. A place like Masada, that plateau fortress in the Judean desert, is the textbook example. Its cliffs were its walls. An attacking force would face exhaustion and exposure before a single arrow was fired. Choosing that unforgiving location was a matter of survival. It turned geography itself into an army, but this strategic thinking went beyond simple fortification. It was about controlling movement. Look at Petra, the rose-red city in Jordan. It wasn't built on a random cliff. It was placed at the nexus of crucial caravan routes, hidden within a narrow canyon called the Syk. To reach it, traders had to pass through this natural, defensible corridor. The Nabateans didn't just live there. They taxed and controlled the flow of incense, silk, and spices across the desert. The monument's grandeur, its tombs and temples carved into the rock, was funded by this geographic chokehold. The site wasn't just beautiful, it was a brilliant economic engine. This logic of connection shaped empires. The vast Incan road system, thousands of miles of engineered pathways through the Andes, bound their territory together. Key centers like Machu Picchu or Ollantaytambo were often placed along these routes. They were way stations, storage depots, symbols of imperial reach. A traveler on the King's Road was never far from a reminder of who built it and who controlled it. Proximity to that network meant prosperity, security, a constant exchange of ideas and goods. A remote outpost could become a cosmopolitan hub, all because of its address. So the blueprint expands again. The builders looked to the stars for alignment, to the earth for energy and material, to the waters for life. And they looked to the horizon for security and opportunity. They chose places that could be defended, that could dominate a landscape visually, that tapped into the vital arteries of trade and communication. This was practical governance expressed in stone, but this accumulation of precision, celestial, terrestrial, hydraulic, strategic, it hints at a staggering possibility. Could this ancient, site-specific wisdom reflect a knowledge we only recently rediscovered? Could their sacred geography have encoded an understanding of the Earth itself? Not just as a flat plane, but as a giant sphere floating in space. The scale of their planning makes you wonder, did they know the shape of the world? Not just their own land, but the whole planet. Some researchers see the placement of monuments, and it looks like a map. The Great Pyramid at Giza. It sits where the longest line of latitude and the longest line of longitude overland cross. Its north-south alignment is off by just a fraction of a degree. That could be chance, but when you see that precision again and again, chance starts to feel unlikely. It points to geodetics, the science of measuring the Earth, which means they might have seen the Earth as a sphere and known how to place markers on that curve. That thinking connects sites over distance. There are alignments that run for miles. In England, a straight line goes from St. Michael's Mount, through Glastonbury Tor, through the Avebury Circle. These are ancient, significant places. To plot that line across hills and valleys suggests a surveyor's view, a view from above, something we think of as modern. It hints at a planned landscape, each site a point in a larger network. Then there's the idea of a center. For the Greeks, Delphi was the omphalos, the world's navel. They believed it was the literal center, the point from which everything unfolded. Other cultures have this too, a sacred mountain, a temple, a stone that marks the axis. This is cosmic ordering. By defining a center, you give structure to all the land around it. You create a map anchored by myth and stars, not by borders. If this was all intentional, what was it for? One idea is unification. How do you bind a kingdom without modern tools? You create a shared sacred geography. You build temples that align with each other and with the sky. A person traveling would see these sites. They'd feel the connection, the invisible threads. A sense of belonging to a larger order. The landscape itself becomes the binding force. Now, was this lost science or deep intuition? That's debated. But the result is the same, a spatial awareness that feels advanced. They weren't just placing stones, they were inscribing a worldview onto the planet. And if the land was their manuscript, then their myths were the key. The stories of creation, of gods, those weren't just tales, they were the manual for reading the sacred landscape. Mythology gave the land a voice. A river wasn't just a river if a god had been there. A mountain wasn't just a mountain if a hero had stood on it. These stories were instructions. They told people where the sacred was, waiting to be found. Take Rome. The legend says Romulus and Remus, twins raised by a wolf, they looked for a sign. They stood on two hills watching the sky. Romulus saw 12 vultures, his brother saw 6. That was the signal. That hill, the Palatine, became the heart of an empire. The city's birthplace, it wasn't chosen for the soil or for defense. It was chosen because the gods pointed. This happens everywhere. In the Maya world, a priest has a dream. A spirit shows him a cave or a spring, a clearing in the jungle. That place, revealed from the other world, becomes the only place for a temple. To build anywhere else would ignore a command. The monument was an answer, a physical answer to a revelation, anchored in stone. These stories did more than pick a spot. They built layers of meaning. Layers that could last for thousands of years. Look at the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. For Jewish tradition, it's the foundation stone of creation, where Abraham made his offering. For Christianity, it's a place of teaching from the life of Jesus. For Islam, it's where the Prophet's night journey happened. The rock itself is almost secondary. It's the narratives layered on it. Each story sanctifies the ground. It draws pilgrims across centuries. It makes the place a center of the world. The geography and the belief become one thing. By following these myths, builders did something. They wove their structures right into the identity of their people. A temple built where a god walked. That wasn't just a building. It was proof of a covenant between the divine and the community. It carried an authority, a spiritual authority. To challenge the temple was to challenge the story. And to challenge the story was to challenge the soul of the civilization. This selection had power, real power. It decided where people traveled, where they gathered for festivals, where they paid their taxes. A site chosen by myth became a hub, a natural political and economic hub. Social structures formed around it, around its maintenance, its rituals. The story, set in geography, dictated the flow of life. So the precision in these placements, it wasn't always about instruments, about star charts. Sometimes it was about listening. Listening for the echo of a story that said, "Build here." This was the oldest zoning law, not written on parchment but in poetry, in sacred dream. And if the gods commanded the where, then the living had to master the how. The final layer of this genius wasn't in choosing the spot. It was in moving the earth itself to match the vision in their minds. The plaza at Chichen Itza was a stage. It was a stage for power. When the equinox sun would cast that serpent of light down the steps of El Castillo, and the crowds gathered to watch, they were participants. They were part of a display. The ruler stood at the center, a bridge between the people and the gods. His authority was made manifest by that alignment, by that cosmic event he commanded. That was the function, the monument as a hub. It centralized everything: religion, administration, economy, identity. all of it flowed through that one point on the map. These sites were the original downtowns, Cahokia, across the Mississippi from St. Louis. Its central plaza, flanked by Monk's Mound, was an engineered landscape. The alignment of its mounds, its open spaces, it wasn't random. It directed movement, it staged ceremonies for thousands to see, it created a hierarchy. The leaders lived up on the highest mounds, performed rituals up there, literally above the community. The layout of the city reinforced the social order. It told every person where they belonged. That geographic precision was a tool of governance, the Aztec rulers placing Tenochtitlan on an island in a lake. That was control. They controlled access. All the roads, all the causeways led to the central temple. Trade, tribute, information, people, all of it flowed along those channels. The rulers could monitor it. They could integrate conquered peoples, bring them into the heart of the empire to see its grandeur. The monument's location was a statement. Control over territory, control over the movement of life, and the choice of site legitimized power by tying it to resources. A temple at the source of a river, or at the only ford for miles. That wasn't just spiritual authority, it was economic authority, political authority. Whoever controlled that site controlled the flow of water, of trade goods, of travelers. It was a choke point of prosperity. To build there was to say, all that passes through here does so with our permission, with our blessing. With our tax, this created spaces where community identity was forged. The shared experience, gathering at the solstice, a harvest festival in the central plaza. Bringing goods to market at the temple gates, these repeated acts wove individuals into a collective. The monument was the loom. Its precise placement, aligned with the heavens and the earth, made it the anchor. The permanent anchor for that shared story. You weren't just from a tribe, you were from the people of the mountain, the people of the Serpent Temple. Your home was defined by that sacred geography, but from that bustling heart, the ancient mind also sought something quieter, a more personal connection. If the plaza was for the many, the monument's design held a path for the one, a coded language, a language of shape and proportion, meant to guide the individual spirit toward something greater. That was the silent power of sacred geometry. The design had its own language, numbers and shapes. The Parthenon in Athens, it looks balanced, but that balance comes from a specific ratio. The golden ratio, where the whole relates to the larger part the same way the larger part relates to the smaller. You see it in nature, in seashells, in flowers. The builders saw it as divine harmony, a mathematical secret to beauty, built into the temple to please the gods. That was sacred geometry, the belief that certain shapes and ratios held power. That by using them you could build a piece of the universe's own order, a perfect small version of the world on Earth, and this went beyond just looks. The Great Pyramid's dimensions, they encode mathematical constants. The ratio of its perimeter to its height is about 2 times pi. Pi is the circle's circumference to its diameter. So in a structure made of squares, they embedded the principle of the circle, a symbol of eternity, of the heavens, a fusion of ideas in stone. Then there are Pythagorean triangles, right-angled shapes with specific side ratios. You find them in temple layouts from India to Egypt. These weren't accidents. They were deliberate, a way to build spiritual concepts into the bones of a building, and the geometry often spread to the whole site. A temple complex might be laid out on a grid based on these sacred ratios. Each courtyard, each altar, placed by a cosmic blueprint that turned the location into a 3-dimensional textbook. A pilgrim walking through the space was walking through a lesson in the order of creation. The landscape became a teaching tool, instruction through experience, not words. This precision had practical effects too. Greek theaters famous for their acoustics. A whisper from the stage can reach the back row. That's not luck, it's geometry. the curve of the seating, the stage placement calculated to channel sound. Engineering for community, so everyone could hear the plays, the speeches. The design created a shared experience and forced perspective in temples' columns that taper, floors that curve up slightly. These subtle tricks made buildings appear larger, more imposing. They made the human feel small and the divine feel vast. The monument used mathematics to create an emotional response. A feeling of awe built by calculation. So why do it? Why encode pi into a pyramid or shape a theater with such precision? Because for these cultures, mathematics wasn't separate from spirituality. It was the grammar of the cosmos. The same ratios that governed a tree's growth or a planet's orbit were the building blocks of sacred space. By using them, the builders were aligning their work with the fundamental truth of reality, making the invisible harmony of the universe visible, tangible. A location shaped by this logic was a true center, where the abstract perfection of numbers met the solid reality of Earth. That connection to mathematical order hints at something deeper. It suggests these builders saw their sacred sites not as separate from the natural world, but as the ultimate expression of it. A final, perfect chord in the symphony of the landscape. The breeze in those old Persian cities, it wasn't just there. They built towers to catch it, wind catchers. They'd rise above the houses, these tall structures with open sides, and they'd funnel the wind down into the homes to cool them in the desert heat. That was the point. The architecture was a response, a calculated one, a way of talking to the climate, choosing a site, designing something. It was about harmony. Builders were observers. They watched the sun's path all through the year. They felt the wind change with the seasons. The local ecosystem, it wasn't just a backdrop. It was a partner. You see it with the Anasazi in the southwest, their cliff dwellings built into those high alcoves in the canyon walls. The rock overhang acted as a roof. It shielded them from the summer sun, from winter snow, and the way those alcoves faced south, they'd catch the low winter sun for warmth. But in summer, when the sun was high, it would pass right overhead, leaving the dwellings in shadow. That placement, it was a system. A passive system for heating and cooling, carved by nature, used by design. This knowledge went deep into the ground itself. Understanding an ecosystem meant knowing where not to build, avoiding floodplains. That was survival, of course, but it was also respect for the river's cycle, its need to swell and recede, building on stable, higher ground that showed an understanding of hydrology, a practical wisdom. From watching the land over generations, they used natural insulation too, planting trees around a settlement to break the wind, using earth as a building material like sod houses. That provided thermal mass, kept interiors warm in winter, cool in summer. That approach, it points to a different philosophy, not about dominating a landscape, but integration, working with the forces of nature, not against them. A monument wasn't imposed on the environment. It was an extension of it, a careful insertion into an existing system meant to minimize disruption, to maximize benefit for the community. The precision in responding to sun, wind, water, it reveals a science. A deep observational science, a science of patterns. They tracked the sun's slow dance from solstice to solstice. They noted the stars that signaled the rainy season. They felt the first hint of a seasonal wind shift on their skin, and they encoded that knowledge, that hard-won knowledge, into the placement of their important places, into their orientation. This intimate dance with environmental rhythms, it points to a larger clock, the one they were trying to read, not just the seasons, but time itself, the grand celestial marking of years, of ages. That stone was a clock, the Intihuatana at Machu Picchu, the hitching post of the sun. Its shadow was a hand moving across a dial of rock, and that was a common purpose. These monuments, they weren't just places in space, they were markers in time. Calendars carved from stone, aligned with the sky. Their function was to track the cycles, the solar year, the lunar month, the precession of the stars. This is how a society regulated itself: when to plant, when to hold the harvest festival, when to begin the ceremonies that renewed the world. The precision for this was staggering. To design a structure that captures one specific beam of light on one specific morning, year after year, that required generations of watchful eyes. It demanded advanced observation. A tradition of careful record-keeping passed down through priests or elders. They had to note the subtle drift of a star's rising point over decades. They had to understand the complex cycle of the moon's orbit, that 18.6-year rhythm. This was long-term science, a project that outlived any single builder, planned for those not yet born. Newgrange in Ireland is an example, a massive tomb mound 5,000 years old. Above its entrance, a small roof box window. For just a few days around the winter solstice, as the sun climbs, a narrow beam of light pierces that window. It travels down a long passageway. It illuminates the central chamber deep within the earth for precisely 17 minutes. In the darkest days of the year, this was a promise. The sun had not abandoned them. It would return. The ritual significance of that moment, watching that light reclaim the sacred space, must have been overwhelming. A direct communication with the forces of life and death. By embedding these markers into the geography, cultures achieved a synchronization. Human activity, the sowing, the reaping, the celebrating was tied to cosmic rhythms. The monument became a living calendar, a communal clock everyone could see. It removed guesswork. It created a shared, predictable rhythm for the entire community, from the farmer to the ruler. This mastery of time points to a deeper need. It wasn't just about scheduling the future. It was about honoring the past. If a stone could mark the solstice, could it also mark a lineage? Could the alignment of a temple doorway point not just to a star, but to a story from 100 generations ago? This tracking of celestial cycles suggests a dual purpose. They were clocks for the living, and they were anchors for memory, repositories for the stories of those who came before, ensuring that with each returning beam of light, the ancestors were not forgotten. The connection to lineage was often literal. It was in the ground itself. At Sutton Hoo in England, you have these burial mounds. They're not just hills. They're markers placed on a high ridge overlooking the river. The geography honors the ones who came before. It links them to the territory of the living. To build a monument at an ancestral burial site was to weave the present into the past. It reinforced a continuity. We are here because they were here first. Their story is the foundation, and this practice of citing important structures where ancestors rested, it's a global phenomenon. The positioning of tombs was often guided by a sacred astronomy. In the Valley of the Kings, the tombs were cut into the bedrock of a specific valley. Those long, descending corridors weren't just architecture. Many were aligned toward specific stars, constellations in the eternal northern sky. It was a celestial roadmap. The soul of the ruler would navigate by these stars to join the gods. The location and the orientation were a single machine for eternal transition. These sites became focal points for rituals. Offerings, ceremonies, festivals held. There were acts of remembrance and renewal. They maintained a conversation across generations. The ancestors, honored this way, became guardians of the land, their presence a benevolent force in the hills and rivers. So by choosing locations with deep tribal history, builders did more than find stable ground. They rooted their monuments in a narrative of identity. A temple built on the burial ground of a founding chieftain wasn't just a place of worship. It was a deed of ownership written in myth and memory. It declared this land is ours not by conquest alone, but by lineage. The stones carried the weight of genealogy. This need to connect with the past, to be anchored by lineage, it flowed into another impulse. If these sites honored those who came before, they also had to serve the living. They had to become spaces for the community to gather. not just in mourning or ritual, but in celebration, in trade, in the daily weaving of social bonds. The monument, in its perfect placement, had to function as a living heart. That shared memory needed a place to happen, a physical stage, like the stones at Karnak in France. Those rows go on for miles, thousands of them standing in these silent lines, and on a day when everyone gathered there, those lines changed, they became channels. They guided movement, they framed the view toward a center, they made a container for the energy of the crowd. The land itself was shaped to hold people, to make them feel like one thing. That was the practical genius of it. It wasn't an empty field. It was a designed environment for mass experience. Precision had a purpose. Clear sightlines were essential. You see it in the steps of a Greek theater or the flat plaza in front of a pyramid in Mesoamerica. The design meant everyone could see. The front row to the very back, they could witness the ritual, the speech, the performance. They had to see it to be part of it, and the sound was calculated too. The curve of a wall, the material of a floor, they carried sound. A chant, a declaration could wash over everyone, uniting them through hearing. Then there were the procession routes. The long causeways to temples like at Angkor Wat or Teotihuacan. They weren't just roads, they were ritual pathways, walking them together, moving toward the sacred center. That was a transformation. It built anticipation. It was a physical journey from the everyday world into the ceremonial space. Sometimes builders used what was already there. A natural bowl in the hills became an amphitheater. A wide river plain became a fairground. They used the land's own shape to build less but get more effect. The community would gather in that cup of earth, and the slopes would hold them, focus their attention inward. The Roman Forum is the classic example. It was placed for interaction, not on the edge. It was the heart of the city where the main roads met, the space for commerce, politics, social life, justice. Your daily life meant passing through, hearing the debates, seeing the ceremonies. That design forced discourse. It allowed the constant, low-level exchange that holds a society together. In a space like that, you don't learn the culture from a lesson. You absorb it by being there. You learn to be a Roman citizen by being in the forum. That was the goal, social cohesion. A successful ritual, a full assembly, reinforced a shared identity. It turned belief into shared experience. The smell of incense, the sound of a prayer, the sight of a leader against the solstice sun. In that moment, the individual faded into the community. The placement of the monument made that fading possible, maybe inevitable. And as gatherings grew, as people came from farther away, the monuments had to be reachable. Their placement started to follow another logic, not just spiritual or social, but the logic of travel. The most powerful spaces became nodes, where spiritual meaning met the paths of human movement. That made them more than destinations. They became landmarks on a larger, invisible map, a map of trade, pilgrimage, communication, connecting distant communities. The monument was the anchor, but the routes to it were the threads, stitching the whole landscape together. Seeing a spire on the horizon was a promise. If you were traveling on a dusty road, walking for months, that first sight of a monument meant something. It meant you were on the right path. The journey was almost over. They built these structures to be seen from far away, on a hilltop or at a river crossing, the highest point on a plain. They were beacons. Their placement was a public service. It guided movement across a landscape that could be vast and treacherous. In a world without maps, these permanent markers were the map. They were a visible point in a featureless sea of desert or a confusing forest. A traveler could line up two distant monuments to chart a course, or use their position against the sun to find direction. This was intentional, this mix of sacred geography and wayfinding. It meant the monument served the living in a practical way every day. Take the Silk Road, those ancient trade routes across Asia. Caravans moved from oasis to oasis, from caravanserai to caravanserai. And often these stopping points were marked by a religious structure, a stupa, a temple, because these sites were maintained, they had water, they offered shelter and a community. Their spiritual meaning guaranteed a level of safety. The monument became a node, a vital node in an economic network. Traders from China met merchants from Persia there. They exchanged silk and spices, but also ideas and art and technology. The sacred site made the secular exchange possible, the exchange that built civilizations. This function peaked with pilgrimage destinations. Santiago de Compostela in Spain. For 1,000 years, people have walked the Camino. The cathedral with its spires is the final goal. But the whole route has other churches, shrines, crosses, each one a milestone, each one offering rest and a reminder. The geography of faith made a physical pathway across a continent. It guided hundreds of thousands of footsteps, creating a river of people and culture and commerce, all flowing to one point. The monument didn't just sit at the end. It dictated the journey's entire shape. So these navigational nodes did more than prevent people from getting lost. They created flows. The constant movement of pilgrims and traders meant wealth flowed to these sites. Towns grew around them, markets flourished, new artistic styles arrived with travelers and got worked into the local architecture. A statue in a French cathedral might show influences from Moorish Spain. Because a pilgrim saw it and described it to a sculptor back home, the monument, by its placement on a travel route, became a catalyst for cultural diffusion. It was a living part of a dynamic system, a fixed point around which the human world swirled and connected. This role as a hub required the monument to be more than spiritually powerful. It had to be physically impressive. It had to communicate its importance instantly to someone who had never seen it, speaking a different language that demanded a conscious attention to appearance. To symbolism, to sheer visual impact, the builders weren't just engineers and astronomers, they were artists, and the site they chose was the first stroke on the canvas. The treasury at Petra, it's carved right out of the cliff face, this rose-red stone. You get to it through this narrow, winding canyon. The walls go straight up, blocking out the sky. And then the canyon just ends, and there it is. This perfect classical facade, columns and statues, all glowing in a sliver of desert sun. They didn't just carve a temple there. They framed it. They used that natural canyon like a grand entrance hall, building the anticipation right up to that final reveal. That's aesthetic engineering. The drama was part of the message. A monument's power didn't come just from the design. It came from this dialogue with the landscape. Builders looked for locations with inherent grandeur. A temple on a mountain peak like the Parthenon on the Acropolis, that was a statement of aspiration, reaching for the heavens, and from below, it looked like a crown on the rock. Inseparable from it, or they used waterfalls. At Sigiriya, in Sri Lanka, water gardens and frescoes set against this massive stone outcrop, the sound and sight of flowing water. It added a living element to the stillness of the stone, or an expansive view. The clifftop monasteries at Meteora in Greece, the endless horizon became part of the spiritual experience. A constant reminder of the vastness of the divine compared to the smallness of human endeavor. Light was their most precise tool at Abu Simbel in Egypt. The great temple was oriented so that twice a year the rising sun would penetrate deep into the interior. Its rays would travel over 60 meters down the hall to illuminate the statues of the gods in the innermost sanctuary. For the rest of the year, those statues sat in shadow, but on those 2 mornings they were bathed in light. This wasn't an accident, it was a calculated spectacle, a performance of solar alignment designed to overwhelm the senses, to make the presence of the gods feel real, tangible in that beam of light. The emotional response was the goal. Awe, reverence, maybe a touch of fear. These feelings reinforced the site's authority. If a place could make your heart stop, take your breath away, then its message carried more weight. You were more likely to listen, to obey, to believe. This harmony between architecture and landscape that's often called the sublime. It's that feeling when human creation and natural beauty fuse into something greater. The builders of Machu Picchu didn't fight the Andes. They let the mountains dictate the city's form. The terraces follow the contours, the buildings nestle into the rock. The result feels both grand and perfectly natural, as if it grew there. This pursuit of beauty was never just decoration. It was a language. The mountain behind a temple wasn't just a pretty backdrop. It was a symbol of stability, of eternity. The river at its base, a symbol of life's flow. By placing their structure in that specific relationship to the mountain and the river, the builders were writing a sentence in stone. Encoding a story about the world, about the gods, about our place in it all. The aesthetic choices were symbolic choices. The beauty was the delivery system for meaning. That symbolic language was read in the land. A mountain wasn't just geology. It was a god's throne, a pillar holding up the sky, and a cave wasn't just a hole. It was a womb of creation, a passage to the underworld. Ancient cultures saw the natural world as sacred forms. They built their monuments to have a conversation with them. That was the art of the symbolic landscape. Placing a temple was often the final piece of a puzzle nature had started. It completed a picture. In Peru, the Inca site of Pisac is on a ridge above the sacred valley. Its terraces and structures don't just sit there. They follow the mountain's contours so precisely that from a distance, the whole complex looks like a giant condor. Wings spread across the ridge. The builders saw that shape in the land and they enhanced it. They turned the location into a massive effigy of a sacred bird. They didn't impose a foreign shape. They revealed the one they believed was already there. This mirroring was profound. In Mesoamerica, the pyramid was literally a man-made mountain. The Temple of the Sun at Teotihuacan, El Castillo at Chichen Itza, their stepped forms with a temple on top, were direct architectural quotes of the surrounding peaks. They were symbolic mountains, bringing the power of the distant volcano into the heart of the city. The line between the built and the natural environment was blurred. A temple's alignment locked this relationship into place. A doorway might frame a distant, sacred peak, so that on a specific day the sun would rise directly behind it. The monument became a sighting device, linking human ritual to the enduring natural form. This turned the entire region into a readable text. The river was a serpent of life. The spring was the eye of a deity. A lone, prominent rock was a petrified ancestor, and monuments acted as punctuation in this grand narrative. A stone circle might mark where sky and earth met. A standing stone might highlight a convergence of terrestrial energies. By building there, people added their voice to the story the land was already telling. This symbolic interaction had a practical purpose, an educational purpose. In a world before written records for most, the landscape itself was the textbook. A young person would learn cosmology not from a scroll, but from a guided walk. An elder would point to the mountain that was the home of the thunder god. They would show the cave where the first people emerged. They would stand at the temple as the solstice sun lined up with the notch in the hills. The knowledge of seasons, of ancestry, of myth was embedded in the geography. To know the land was to know your history, your duties, your place in the cosmos. Encoding narrative into the earth made the knowledge resilient. A book can burn. A temple can fall, but a mountain is harder to erase. As long as the people remained on the land, the primary symbols of their identity remained visible, waiting to be interpreted anew by each generation. The monument's precise placement ensured that interpretation was guided, that the story remained consistent. It anchored the myth to a specific point in the physical world. This deep, symbolic reading suggests a mind that saw connections everywhere. It was a holistic vision. Every rock and river part of a living, meaningful whole. But to create monuments that spoke this language, the builders needed more than reverence. They needed a method. A repeatable, teachable system for translating vision into stone, and that points toward a possibility, a formalized, ancient science of placement, a lost technology of sacred geography. Angkor Wat's walls are like a stone encyclopedia. They go on for hundreds of meters, carved with these intricate scenes, Hindu epics, royal processions, celestial dancers. You could walk for hours reading stories of gods and kings, but the lesson wasn't just on the walls, it was in the ground you stood on. The whole complex, with its vast moat representing the cosmic ocean, its central tower for Mount Meruit was a three-dimensional model of the universe. To be there was to be inside the cosmology you were learning. The monument was a library, not of scrolls but of space and stone. Its placement, its alignments, its symbolic layout, all of it was designed to teach. To transmit a civilization's core knowledge to anyone walking its paths. These sites were the original open-air universities, where the curriculum was written in architecture and landscape. An initiate wouldn't just hear about the solstice. They'd stand in the spot and watch the sun's ray pierce the darkness of a tomb like at Newgrange. They'd feel the morning air, see the golden light creep across stone, and understand cyclical renewal in their bones. That direct experience made it unforgettable. It fused intellectual knowledge with sensory memory. The precision of the alignment was key. If the sunbeam missed, the teaching failed. So builders calibrated these stone instruments with incredible care, creating reliable demonstrations of astronomical principles. A temple corridor aligned to the rising star Sirius, like in ancient Egypt, didn't just honor a goddess. It became a classroom for tracking the star that heralded the Nile's flood. It taught the connection between celestial event and earthly survival. The layout of a site often encoded mathematical knowledge. The repeated use of sacred geometry, the golden ratio, Pythagorean triangles, wasn't hidden. It was displayed in the proportions of courtyards, the spacing of columns. To study the architecture was to study the mathematical harmony believed to underpin the cosmos. A student could measure, could calculate, could see the abstract made concrete. This was hands-on learning at the grandest scale. Beyond astronomy and math, these spaces taught ethics and history. The bas-reliefs at Borobudur in Indonesia guide a pilgrim along a spiraling path upward. The carvings start with scenes of worldly desire and consequence, moving toward teachings of compassion as you ascend. The physical journey up the monument mirrors the spiritual journey it prescribes. Your own effort to climb becomes part of the lesson in overcoming attachments. The geographic placement of these hubs was strategic, often at the heart of a community or at the end of a pilgrimage route, ensuring a constant flow of learners. By making the sacred site the primary classroom, societies fused spiritual authority with intellectual authority. The knowledge gained there was sanctified. It carried the weight of tradition and divine order. This ensured the preservation of wisdom. Stories carved in stone are harder to lose than stories whispered in a village. Alignments built into a mountain endure longer than a parchment chart. The monument, in its perfect, permanent placement, became a backup drive for cultural memory. A library that could withstand the collapse of empires, waiting for its lessons to be read again. This role in shaping mind and spirit leads to a final dimension. If they could teach the cosmos and mold character, many believed they could also restore the body. The same precise energies harnessed for spiritual connection were often sought for healing, turning the geographic choice into a destination for wellness and hope. The water at Bath Spring, it was mineral-rich. It was more than just water. It was a kind of promise, renewal. For centuries people traveled there. They'd immerse themselves in that warmth, believing the earth itself was offering a cure. And that belief, it wasn't unique. All across the ancient world, monuments and sanctuaries, they were placed deliberately. They were built where the earth had already marked a place as special. Where hot water bubbled up, where rare herbs grew, where the air just felt different, these were healing landscapes. The builders saw a convergence, spiritual significance, and tangible therapeutic properties. They weren't just building temples, they were building hospitals where geography and faith and the human body all met. The most famous examples are the Asclepiae. Healing temples for Asclepius, the Greek god of medicine. They weren't in noisy city centers, they were placed carefully in serene environments, often near springs, in groves of trees, on hillsides with a breeze. The setting itself, that was the first part of the treatment. Clean air, peaceful sounds, a beautiful view, these were prescribed for calming the mind and spirit, which was seen as essential for physical recovery. Patients would come, make offerings, then sleep in a special hall called the Abaton. In their dreams, Asclepius was believed to visit, offering a diagnosis or sometimes a miraculous cure. The ritual, the belief, the restorative environment, they all worked together. The precise placement of the sanctuary amplified its power. It created a total system for healing. And this logic extended far beyond Greece. In Japan, onsen's hot spring baths, they've been sacred sites for over 1,000 years. Buddhist temples were often built right next to these geothermal springs. So the act of bathing became both physical purification and spiritual cleansing. The volcanic earth provided the heat and minerals. The spiritual infrastructure provided the context. It was a holistic package. Similarly, in the Andes, certain high-altitude lakes or springs were considered huacas, sacred places with reputations for healing specific ailments. Pilgrims would travel for days to reach these remote spots, drink the water, make offerings. The difficulty of the journey itself was part of the process. The geographic remoteness underscored the site's special power. So what were they tapping into? From a modern view, we can point to real properties. Mineral springs contain sulfur, lithium, magnesium. Elements that can soothe muscles, improve skin, affect mood. Geothermal heat increases circulation. Negative ions near waterfalls or mountain air are linked to well-being. The ancient builders, they may not have understood the chemistry, but through generations of observation, they knew which locations made people feel better. Which waters reduced pain, which places seemed to ease the mind, and then they monumentalized these spots. By building a temple or carving a pool, they were curating the earth's pharmacy. Marking it, enhancing it, creating a structured space where its benefits could be accessed within a framework of ritual and belief. This made the healing sanctuary a hub of innovation. As the sick and hopeful gathered, healers and priests observed. They catalogued which treatments worked, which local herbs worked alongside the waters and the rituals. These sites became the earliest clinical research centers, in a way, a blend of empirical observation and spiritual practice. The knowledge gained was encoded not in books, but in the traditions of the place itself. In the specific prayers said at a certain pool, or the diet followed during a temple stay. So the geographic choice, it didn't just attract the infirm. It fostered a living tradition of wellness, rooted in a deep, intuitive understanding of the environment's impact on human health. It reflected a worldview where the earth wasn't inert. It was actively benevolent, offering specific gifts in specific places for those who knew where to look. And if the land could heal the body and spirit, then it stands to reason the most sacred sites of all were those for the final, most profound transition. The journey from this world to the next. The stones at Puma Punku are scattered. They're cut with a precision that shouldn't be possible. These sharp angles, these interlocking channels. Surfaces so flat they fit without mortar. It's more than a building, it's a demonstration, a civilization showing what it can do. Sometimes the site itself is the showcase. You turn the geography into a platform. You build where no one thinks you can, and that declares mastery over nature, over material, over the limits of what's possible. The monasteries of Meteora are like that, perched on those sandstone pillars in Greece. To reach them originally meant ropes, ladders, nets hauled up. Building there was defiance against gravity. The message was clear: our faith and our engineering can conquer any height. It wasn't just for solitude. It was spectacle, a visible testament, something you could see for miles. That drive to conquer geography served a function: mobilizing labor, solving logistics, cutting and moving stone with such accuracy. It reinforced a hierarchy. It proved the ruling class could command these resources. It inspired awe in neighbors, maybe fear. A visitor seeing Puma Punku's shattered perfection or gazing up at Meteora would carry home a story. A story of a powerful culture, one not to be challenged. The precision required went beyond symbolism. It demanded real knowledge. Leveling a foundation on a steep hillside, like at Machu Picchu, required sophisticated surveying. Managing water runoff, there was a hydrological feat. Transporting those multi-ton andesite blocks for Puma Punku from a quarry over 50 miles away across Lake Titicaca. That speaks to a mastery of logistics, of buoyancy, of sheer manpower. This was innovation in stone. Each impossible location pushed the boundaries of engineering. The solutions they devised: counterweights, ramps, pulleys, precise cutting that became their technological legacy. They were creating open-air exhibitions. Exhibitions of their greatest achievements. The site was the exhibit hall, but these displays weren't just about pride or power. They were expensive. Deeply expensive. The labor, the materials, the years of effort. It had to be justified beyond a spiritual or political statement. There was almost always an economic engine behind it. A practical return on that staggering investment. Gold from those mines built a kingdom. The walls of Great Zimbabwe, those monumental walls, they rose from that landscape. They were funded by it, funded by the gold veins in the hills all around, mined and then traded across the Indian Ocean. And that story, it's not an isolated one. You see it with obsidian quarries supplying tools for ancient empires. You see it with fertile valleys that fed their workers. Choosing a site was often an economic calculation. A monument placed to control a resource was a declaration. It declared ownership and it generated wealth. The location wasn't just spiritually ideal. It was logistically brilliant. It shortened the distance between the source of wealth and the seat of power. At Great Zimbabwe, the royal enclosure was the administrative heart. It oversaw the flow, gold from the mine to the market. The architecture made this control possible. Granaries for surplus grain, workshops for trade goods. Secure compounds. It was a system designed for economic efficiency as much as for spiritual grandeur. The city's layout managed the economy that sustained it. That same logic shows in port cities. Take Alexandria, founded by Alexander the Great. Its location on the Mediterranean coast that wasn't chosen for a celestial alignment. It was a commercial choice. It was the perfect nexus between the agricultural wealth of the Nile and the maritime trade routes of the known world. The Lighthouse of Alexandria, one of the Seven Wonders, it was more than a navigational aid. It was a beacon of prosperity, a symbol. It said, here is safety, here is wealth, here is the center of exchange. The city's monuments, its great library and temples, they were funded by tariffs. Tariffs on the spices, silks, and grain flowing through its harbors. The architecture reflected that confidence, the economic confidence of a commercial superpower. And this economic rationale, it provided sustainability. A temple built on faith alone might crumble when beliefs changed, but a monument built on a gold mine or at a trade crossroads, it had a revenue stream. It could fund its own maintenance, pay for priests and artisans, finance further expansion. The wealth from the site's location created a cycle. More trade meant more taxes. More taxes meant more construction. More construction attracted more prestige and more trade. That economic foundation made the spiritual statements possible. It turned a sacred site into a resilient hub. This control of resources went beyond precious metals. It was about the essentials of life. The Hohokam culture in the American Southwest, they built an extensive canal system. They transformed the arid Salt River Valley into farmland. Their platform mounds and ball courts were placed at the center of this irrigated landscape. By controlling the water, the most vital resource, they controlled the community's survival. They controlled its prosperity. The monument became the symbol of that authority. The authority over life itself. So while the stars dictated alignment and the earth suggested placement, the purse dictated feasibility. The most awe-inspiring sights in the world, they are testaments not only to spiritual vision, but to economic acumen. They are monuments built by treasure for the purpose of attracting more. That tangible, wealth-driven foundation supported another ambition, a more ethereal one. The desire to build something that would outlast the flow of gold, outlast the shifting trade routes, to create a legacy that would speak not of wealth but of eternity. The pyramids are standing because they were careful about where they put them. They built on bedrock, not on sand. They looked for high ground, a plateau above where the Nile would flood. Every choice was a bet against time. It wasn't just about getting through the next season. It was about the monument being there 1,000 years later. 10,000 years later, a statement set into the land itself, meant to outlast language, to outlast empires, to outlast even the memory of the builders. That need for permanence guided everything about where to build. Builders had to think like climatologists. They'd see which side of a mountain took the worst storms, and they'd put their important walls on the other side. They'd watch how water moved in a heavy rain, and they'd cut channels to keep it away from the foundations. They'd face a temple so the wind wouldn't blow sand or rain straight into the doorways. At Mesa Verde, the ancestral pueblones built under huge rock overhangs. That stone roof protected them from sun and snow, but also from water running down the cliff. They put their homes in a natural shelter. That decision kept those buildings standing for centuries after everyone left. That kind of foresight was like talking to the future. Building for people they'd never see. For us, the materials were part of that promise. Granite instead of softer limestone, baked brick instead of mud brick. They used what would last, even if it was harder to get, harder to work. The extra labor was an investment, a down payment, and that idea is deep. A culture that builds for permanence is saying something about its place in the world. It's saying our gods are forever, our view of the universe is right, and we're going to set that truth into the earth in a form so solid that even nature, working slowly, can't wipe it away. The monument becomes an anchor for memory. Even if the people leave, even if their name is lost, the structure stays, a question mark left on the land, making everyone who comes later wonder who they were and what they knew. That anchoring was physical and spiritual. By tying their greatest work to the most stable, carefully chosen points in the landscape, they made permanent markers. Not just for finding your way, but for knowing who you are. A mountain might wear down over thousands of years, but the temple at its foot, built on that solid base, might hold on a little longer, keeping the story in place. But to really turn a well-chosen site from just good land into a sacred anchor, something final had to happen. The place had to be awakened. Made holy, connected to something divine. That's where geography met ritual. The ground was chosen, the stones were cut, the alignment was set, but it was still just a place. It had to be awakened, and everywhere from Mesopotamia to the Maya, there was a final step before you could begin. A ritual, a ceremony to make the location sacred. To turn geography into something holy, think of ancient Sumer. A priest under a specific star pattern would prepare something, a foundation deposit. This was a formal act. They'd dig a pit at the exact center of where the temple would go, and into that pit they'd lower a box. Inside the box were objects of great meaning. Figurines of gods, tablets with prayers, precious stones, sometimes even a lock of the ruler's hair or their fingernails. This was a spiritual anchor. A gift to the earth spirits, to the gods below, a plea for their blessing. By burying these things, they were implanting the site with a divine presence, making the ground itself holy, and the timing was never random. It was tied to the sky, a solstice sunrise, a lunar eclipse, the rising of a certain star. This synchronization was vital. It wasn't enough to build in the right place. You had to begin at the right moment, a moment when the veil was thin, when the cosmos gave its signal. The precision of the ritual was as crucial as the surveyor's line. A mistake here meant the project was doomed, built on unstable ground. In Mesoamerica, the practice could be more solemn. Before a pyramid was expanded or a new ball court built, they'd place offerings in sealed chambers. Archaeologists find them, ceremonial objects, jade, shells, and sometimes human remains, likely volunteers or honored persons. Their presence was meant to guard the site forever. The act was a transformation. These individuals became eternal guardians. Their essence merged with the monument. This consecration created a bond between the physical structure and the supernatural. It turned the site into a conduit, a place where prayers could be heard, where gods could descend. Once a site was awakened like this, once it was charged, it became a magnet. Not just for pilgrims, for artists, for thinkers, for traders from far away. A sanctified place was a blank canvas. A civilization could project its highest art onto it. The walls of Karnak, the gates of Sanchai, they became galleries of sacred stories told in stone, and as travelers came to see these wonders, they brought their own styles. A Greek sculptor might see Persian reliefs and adopt a new flow. An Indian artisan might hear a Chinese motif and reinterpret it in local stone. The sacred site became a crucible, a hub for cultural mixing. The geographic precision that made it a spiritual node also made it a creative hub, where the divine inspiration of one culture could spark innovation in another. Weaving a richer tapestry across continents, Ai Khanum, these ruins out on the Silk Road, a Greek theater, but then a palace in the Persian style, a Corinthian capital next to a temple that looks Mesopotamian. This was a city started by one of Alexander's generals, but it wasn't just a fort, it was an experiment, a deliberate one, trying to blend cultures together. Its buildings were like a conversation, a dialogue in stone, Greek, Egyptian, Persian ideas all talking to each other, and that happened because of where they put it. Right at a crossroads where trade routes from India met the Mediterranean caravans, ideas moved as freely as the goods, so a monument built there, it couldn't help it. It became a mixing place. Builders from different worlds worked together. A Greek architect might use a Persian stepped platform. A local sculptor might make a statue of Hercules, but give him the face and clothes of a Central Asian god. The stonework itself told that story. This hybrid style, it wasn't confusion, it was confidence. They were forging a new cosmopolitan identity, one that could absorb things, adapt, innovate. The geography made that possible. Putting your biggest buildings at these hubs of movement meant everyone would see them, and in seeing them, they'd be influenced. The result was something new. Hellenistic cities like Pergamon or Alexandria, they were labs for this kind of fusion. Greek philosophy schools debating next to Egyptian mystery cults. Local government blending with imperial administration models. The central monument, a temple or a library, it became the symbol of that blended world. A testament to connection, this went deeper than just looks. It led to real innovation. A religious site might start worshipping a syncretic god, a fusion of two pantheons. Something that appealed to more people. An architectural technique from one place, like the Persian vault, could solve a building problem somewhere else. Letting them design more ambitiously, the strategic location forced that interaction, made the exchange inevitable, not just of goods but of blueprints. Hymns, legal codes, by building their identity at a crossroads, they were making a choice, asserting their presence but also opening up. The monument was both a flag planted in the ground and an open door. That created resilient centers of civilization, places that could draw on many streams of knowledge to solve problems, make art, govern diverse people. They were nodes in a network, a global network before that was a word, and sometimes this thinking went into the earth itself. Some traditions say these strategic sites weren't just on trade routes. They were aligned on lines of terrestrial energy, ley lines, dragon lines, song lines. Different cultures had different names. The idea was that certain spots, often where monuments are, were like acupuncture points on the earth. Where this energy was concentrated, building a temple or a stone circle, there was thought to tap into a planetary network. This belief in a global energy grid, it's the ultimate synthesis. Geographic precision meeting spiritual cosmology. It suggests those ancient planners, through intuition or some lost science, weren't just marking territory. They were participating in a worldwide system, connecting their local sacred site to a web of power that spanned continents. Whether that was literal or metaphorical, the outcome was the same. It fostered a worldview of deep interconnection, where a monument in England, a pyramid in Egypt, a temple in Cambodia, they could all be part of one vast, intentional pattern. So the choice of location, it was about more than politics or resources. It was about plugging into a conversation that was both human and cosmic. Weaving together land, sky, trade, and belief into a tapestry we're still trying to read. The idea of a worldwide web of sacred sites, it's a grand theory. It says the Great Pyramid, Stonehenge, Teotihuacan, they aren't isolated. They're points on a grid, alignments that stretch across oceans, forming a great circle around the Earth. The hypothesis is a lost global civilization, or at least a shared system of knowledge now forgotten. It often starts with geometry. People map lines between distant sites. They find these relationships. The Great Pyramid is nearly 1/3 of the way around the world from the Nazca lines. The angular distance from Giza to Angkor Wat is a significant fraction of a circle. These are great circle routes, the shortest paths on a sphere. The implication is they knew the Earth was round, knew its dimensions. They were geodetic engineers. On a planetary scale, then it extends into numbers, sacred geometry. The same constants appear, pi, the golden ratio, specific astronomical numbers, in monuments separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years. It's hard to call that coincidence, so the question is a common source, a primordial tradition of sacred science, carried with early migrations, or was it discovered independently, again and again? Because it reflects a fundamental truth about the universe, something any observant culture would find. The proposed mechanisms vary. Some say a highly advanced civilization. Now vanished, seeded knowledge before a cataclysm. Others propose sustained long-distance contact, sea routes we've underestimated. A more accepted view is cultural diffusion. Slow ideas traveling with trade goods over millennia, carried by travelers and migrants. A building technique spreads, gets adapted, inspires similar precision somewhere new. That doesn't require one global civilization. It's a long, slow conversation across the human family. These ideas are controversial. Mainstream archaeology questions the statistics. Says with enough ancient sites, you can draw significant lines by chance. The lack of evidence for direct contact is a hurdle between Bronze Age Egypt and pre-Columbian Mesoamerica. But the patterns persist. They challenge the narrative of isolated development, push researchers to look for subtler connections. whether fact or speculation, they serve a purpose. They force a reconsideration of human unity, this drive to build with celestial precision, to anchor communities in sacred geography. It looks like a universal impulse. A shared longing to find meaning in the cosmos, to mark our place. The monuments become a common language, stone and alignment, whispering the same questions about existence. No matter whose hands did the carving, and that leads the gaze forward, if these sites are a fragile inheritance, a library of human aspiration written in the landscape. Then what's our responsibility now? How do we interpret these whispers? How do we protect them? The Guatemalan jungle canopy hides something so large you had to see it from above. A LiDAR laser scan goes through the dense green, takes away the trees, and shows a faint grid underneath. A huge system of causeways, reservoirs, platforms. A whole Maya city laid out with geometric precision, sitting there unseen for centuries. That's the modern rediscovery. We're not just guessing about ancient skill anymore. We're measuring it, using satellites that map from space, ground-penetrating radar that sees through dirt, 3D models that let us walk through a lost temple in virtual reality. These tools are like new eyes for us. They prove what the builders understood. That line from the temple door to the sunrise on the solstice. Our tools measure the angle, and it's perfect. That small rise in a field, the radar shows it's the base of a wall that's been buried a long time. We can finally see the scale of their planning with a clarity they probably never imagined. It's a confirmation of how advanced they were, a quiet talk across time where their exactness meets our instruments. And this work isn't just about machines used by outsiders anymore. More and more, modern archaeology is listening. It puts laser scans together with the living memory of indigenous communities. Elders tell stories handed down for generations, stories that say why a spring is holy or why a path bends a certain way. That partnership changes how we see why a place was chosen. The scientific data and the spoken stories start to connect, making a fuller, more respectful picture. The rediscovery answers old questions, sure, but it also finds a new kind of pressure, because as we chart these fragile plans from the air, we're also charting the modern dangers getting closer. Deforestation, cities spreading, the slow advance of climate change. The same technologies that uncover these sites also show how easily they could be lost. Saving them isn't just about keeping things the same now. It's about making sure the conversation keeps going. Making sure the stories written into this precise landscape, stories that waited so long to be heard, last for the people who come after us. They built for forever. Our job is to make sure their message doesn't get drowned out by our world. The stones at Machu Picchu carry the weight of the modern world. Millions of footsteps every year, a constant vibration, a gentle, relentless abrasion. That's the central dilemma now. The fascination that draws us to these places, the global curiosity we unlocked by finding them again, that same force can wear them away. The geographic precision that let them endure for centuries faces a new test, not just the slow grind of natural erosion, but the concentrated pressure of human admiration. The pathways made for Inca processions now support a daily pilgrimage of global tourism. And every visitor, no matter how careful, leaves an invisible trace. It's a problem of love. We love these sites to the point of threatening them, which forces a balance between access and preservation, between sharing a world heritage and protecting its fragile fabric. So geographic management takes on a new urgency. At many sites now you see carefully calculated visitor limits, timed entry tickets, restricted pathways that guide the flow away from the most sensitive areas. The goal is to spread the impact, to give the stones, the soil, a chance to recover. Restoration projects work with a surgeon's caution, using traditional materials and methods where they can. The aim isn't to rebuild but to stabilize, to hold the line against time just a little longer so that future generations can stand in that same spot and feel that same awe. But the threats aren't only underfoot, they're on the horizon. Urban encroachment creeps closer to ancient boundaries. The lights and noise of a growing city can drown out the silent dialogue a temple was meant to have with the stars. And resource extraction, mining, deforestation, it can alter the very landscape that gave the site its meaning. It severs the symbolic connections the builders so carefully made. A sacred mountain stripped for its minerals is no longer a sacred mountain. It becomes a scar, and the monument at its base loses a part of its soul. So true preservation has to look beyond the monument itself. It has to protect the intentionality of its placement. That means maintaining the sightlines to distant peaks, preserving the acoustic quality of a canyon, safeguarding the spring that was its lifeblood. It's about conserving the entire geographic conversation, the alignment with the sky, the relationship with the earth, the flow of water. A fence around the stones isn't enough if the context is destroyed. The lesson from the builders is one of holistic vision. They saw the site as part of a living system. Our conservation efforts have to try to do the same, and as we face these complex challenges, we're engaging in a new dialogue with the past. We're asking, how do we honor your work? How do we protect the library of stone you left us? The answers need humility and innovation. They require listening to scientists, to historians, and crucially, to the descendant communities for whom these sites aren't ruins. Their living history, the enduring lesson of these ancient choices, isn't just their astronomical genius or their engineering prowess. It's their demonstration of long-term thinking. They built for a future they would never see. Our task now is to extend that timeline, to make sure the precise, meaningful geography they inscribed upon the earth remains legible. Not just as a relic, but as a continuing source of wonder and instruction for the world to come. We've come a long way, from the stones at Salisbury Plain up to the peaks in the Andes. And what it shows is this: these places weren't just put somewhere by chance. They were part of a conversation, a layered, deliberate exchange between human ambition and the living world. The sky gave them a clock, a compass, the earth offered its energy, its bones, water marked the sacred paths, and human need for community, for defense, for meaning, wove all of that together into one single tapestry. Each site is a fusion, celestial mathematics meeting terrestrial intuition, spiritual yearning meeting practical genius. They were scientists reading the stars, engineers listening to the land, poets writing their cosmology in stone. Their precision was their language, a way to encode their deepest understanding of reality right into the landscape itself. So what's left for us standing here now? We're left with a legacy of intention, a reminder. Our ancestors didn't see the world as a blank slate to conquer. They saw it as a partner to understand. They sought harmony with the forces around them. They built their grandest statements in alignment with the cosmos, with the contours of the earth, and that changes how we see our own surroundings. Every hill, every river bend, every open plain, they might hold a story we've forgotten how to read. Next time you look at a map or gaze at a horizon, think about the invisible lines, the alignments we don't calculate anymore, the stories we no longer tell about a particular spring or a solitary rock. Our modern world is built on different coordinates, but the human desire to find meaning in our place that remains. These monuments challenge us to look deeper, to see not just a ruin but a decision, a choice made with incredible care for reasons that were both practical and profound. They ask us to remember. We're part of a long conversation with this planet, a conversation about where we belong and what we choose to build there. So the question turns to you. After all this, which site's geographic precision leaves you most in awe? Is it the solar alignment of a pyramid, the acoustic mystery of a theater, or the sheer logistical triumph of a city in the cloud? Share your thoughts below. We'd love to hear which of these ancient dialogues resonates with you. And if you're hungry for more journeys into the puzzles of our past, be sure to subscribe. Our next adventure into history's great mysteries is always just ahead.